if American importers have to pay 80% tariffs and China presumably imposes 80% tariffs on American goods in exchange, that's a real blow to this incredible trading relationship, which, on which we rely, which America relies for its cheap iPhones, cheap electronics, many other cheap goods. Do you want that trade to come to an end? What will happen to the prices of these goods if they can't be made in China? How long will it take for other markets to open up, to build your iPhone factories in India or Vietnam itself? Or do you just, you build them in America using American workers, in which case they'll, of course, be much more expensive because American labor is much more expensive than Vietnamese or Chinese labor.
Now let's speak to Richard Spencer, who's the Times China correspondent. Morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Good to speak to you. I suppose the starting point of these trade talks is where we'll begin as well, because the steep tariffs on China imposed by the US. Fresh data this weekend shows that China's overall exports have actually grown sharply for April. Does that mean that China's going into this actually from the position of strength?
Yeah, I think they are, actually. I mean, I think they not just because of these trade statistics, but just because of what you heard, which is that, the American side is basically saying, oh, tariffs, they're not what it's all about. We're actually trying to we're trying to sort of talk about other things, which is a sort of backtrack, right? And China's saying, okay, well, that's what we said all along. We're always happy to have a conversation with you, as long as you're not trying to sort of punish us with these massive 145% tariffs. And Trump's already saying, well, we're going to reduce them. In which case China sort of says, well, you're on our territory. We're always open to talks. You tell us what you want, and we'll go away and think about them. It hands China a position of moral strength. Now, the export figures, I mean, you can't go too much on 1 month because, of course, China saw these tariffs coming. Trump had signaled them, so was preparing, and of course the exporters were particularly, and they were preparing for this. They were preparing new markets in Southeast Asia, for example, for all the products that would no longer be able to be sold to America. But those countries in Southeast Asia are now sort of saying, well, actually, we don't want all these cheap imports either. So they're going to start preparing to hit back. So it's still a big problem for China, these tariffs. In the long term, it's not good for its export market to have, one of its biggest markets shut off to it. America is about 13% of its export market. That's not as big as it was. It's not a massive figure, but it's quite significant for Chinese companies.
In terms of who will be meeting in Geneva, just tell us about the Chinese delegation specifically. I'm quite intrigued by Vice Premier He Lifeng, who is a friend of Xi, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, He Lifeng, to give him his is always a confusing surname in Chinese, but it's pronounced He. He is the chief economic guy in the regime, if you like, at the top levels. He's the vice premier in charge of economics and finance, which is the most important of those four vice premiers that they have. So he's outside the absolute top ranks of the Chinese Communist Party, but he's in the sort of next tier down, if you like. Yes, those positions, those key positions in that sort of second tier are very much handpicked by Xi Jinping himself. So yeah, he has the confidence and the experience to handle this. The question really is whether Scott Bessent, how much he has the full confidence of Trump. He's the most sort of realist, the most normal, you might say, of Trump's advisors. He's the one who wants deals, who wants the most standard and normal approach to trade relations of Trump's advisors. So he's been given this power to do a deal. We just have to trust that that what he says will be accepted by Trump, because that's much less clear in the American system as it currently is in the Chinese system.
In terms of Trump's approach then, and the Trump administration's approach, he's already been posting on Truth Social, as is his wont. Tariffs currently at 145%, but he suggests 80% might be about where they get to. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, to go back to first principles, a lot of people, including Democrats in America, and a lot of economists in China as well as in America, agree that the trade relationship between China and America is unbalanced. These massive trade surpluses that China has with many countries, but particularly with America, and particularly the way that it achieves this by recycling the profits into holdings of dollar and other foreign currency reserves, which adds security to the Chinese economic system, but effectively forces America to live in a state of constant debt is a danger and destabilizing. So there is an argument, a very strong argument, that some kind of tariffs and controls on this trade, as opposed to the sort of the purist American traditional view of sort of open markets, free financial flows, and so on, is necessary to restabilize the economy, and tariffs might be part of that. The trouble with these headline figures is that they come over as threats rather than as negotiations. 80% is still a huge tariff, and if American importers have to pay 80% tariffs, and China presumably imposes 80% tariffs on American goods in exchange, that's a real blow to this incredible trading relationship, on which we rely, which America relies for its cheap iPhones, cheap electronics, many other cheap goods. Do you want that trade to come to an end? What will happen to the prices of these goods if they can't be made in China? How long will it take for other markets to open up, to build your iPhone factories in India or Vietnam itself? Or do you just, you build them in America using American workers, in which case they'll, of course, be much more expensive because American labor is much more expensive than Vietnamese or Chinese labor. I mean, these are huge questions which aren't really answered by any particular tariff figure that Trump decides to come up with.
Richard, really good to speak to you. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Richard Spencer there, who is the Times China correspondent.
What parameters have you given Scott Bessent on negotiating with China this weekend?
We have to make a great deal for America.
Are you going to be disappointed if he comes back without a deal?
No, not at all, because we already made a great deal. We're not doing business with China right now. We're losing 5,000 soldiers a week.
Have you given Bessent a number of how low you're willing to go?
Yeah, I am.
Are you willing to share that number?
Message for both of them. Thank you very much.